FAMU head coach Willie Simmons only needed one quote after the loss to USF to perfectly describe FAMU now and the bright future they have in 2023. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer with USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every single day. I'm thankful for it. I just hope that you remember that just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S, ends with an S. And today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics designed to treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. We wrap up today's episode with a bit of a two-part. We haven't had a double feature in a while, but we have North Carolina Central and their big opportunity against UCLA, but then also Hampton versus Howard and how the running game will be impactful in the battle for the real HU. Those are two of our 3 games of the week, with our third one and the major one, the headliner, of course, being on tomorrow's episode. But I wanted to give these two a little bit of shine, a segment of their own, because I felt like they deserved it. But before any of that, before we preview them, as far as week 3 goes, I want to look at what FAMU was able to do in not only week 2, but then also what they look like through the rest of the season. Because I felt like Willie Simmons perfectly described his team with just one quote. And sometimes, you go through a press conference and you get, oh, this is what the defense looked like. And this is who we liked on offense. And we want to improve here. And it's a bunch of questions to tell a story. But in this one quote, 2 sentences, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, 2 sentences. He perfectly described not only where FAMU stands in week 2, but then also the bright future in the rest of the season. That's what I mean, because they have high goals, high standards of what they expect to achieve at FAMU in this season. Here's the quote. The talent is there. I think everyone saw that tonight, but like we always tell our guys, talent is not enough. It's about the little things. That's the quote. And I love it. I'm going to read it again because you can really break this into 2 halves, and we will break this into 2 halves to describe exactly what he's saying and what it means for the team. The talent is there. I think everyone saw that tonight, but like we always tell our guys, talent is not enough. It's about the little things. So let's cut that in half. Talent is there, and everyone saw that tonight. To me, that's the most important thing. If you are a high-level HBCU, these are the type of games that you can compete in. I know often we talk about FBS teams, but I believe that those group of 5 matchups are real ways for the upper echelon of HBCUs. I'm not saying that every single HBCU can go up against what would be a group of 5. I was going to call it mid-major, but in football, they call it group of 5. Not all HBCUs can go against those teams and be successful or even give them a game. Like, that's just not the case. But the upper echelon HBCUs oftentimes can compete with them. That's how I feel about it. So as FAMU being a certified upper echelon HBCU, and you're going up against a team from the AAC, not the ACC, but the American Athletic Conference in South Florida, this is the type of game you can compete in. And that's exactly what they came in and did. And that's what he means when he says the talent is there. It was clear the talent is there. Many people sitting there like, oh, FAMU's really giving them a game in the third quarter? Yeah, they are, because this is a good team. So it certified that, or it cemented that. And it's kind of a confirmation situation where FAMU, I think FAMU is a good team. Already thought FAMU was a good team. Before they even came into the season, I thought they were a good team. They beat Jackson State. I still think they're a good team. They come in and they compete against USF, an FBS opponent, and really keep them on the ropes at times. I still think they're a good team. It's not as if I'm questioning it. They just continue to prove it to me over the first 2 weeks of the season. So just a blanket statement is FAMU is a talented team. That's what you can say. FAMU is a talented team, right? But how talented, you'll have those questions and whatnot, how far they can go. But hanging with USF went a long way to say, yeah, this is one of the best teams in HBCU college football. But then you have the next part of the sentence, and that's then talent is not enough. It's about the little things. When he says that the talent is not enough, that's true. That's true, because you got to get out of your own way. You can't have games like week 1 where you're consistently overthrowing targets. And I like Jeremy Musa, but you can't have games like that, right? You look at week 2, you have 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions by Musa. And I'm not trying to pick on him because I really do think he's a fantastic quarterback. I like him a lot, but he's the quarterback. And as the quarterback, you're going to get a lot of praise and you're going to get a lot of criticism as well. That's just what comes with the position. But overall, the mistakes as well kind of point towards him. He's not the only one making mistakes, but he is somebody who's making glaring mistakes. So I'm going to address that. But these are the type of things that you can't let happen. I know a lot of times, when you get past the FBS competition, once you get into conference play, things smoothen themselves out. And that could be true, but you don't allow it to, you don't sit there and hope it happens. You don't not address it in hopes like, oh yeah, once we start getting into the swag play, everything's going to be smooth. Because now you get to, I don't want to say formulating habits, but you get to getting into a groove of doing things and, I can come back from this. You're not always going to come back from missing your targets or having 3 interceptions. You're not going to have those from missing tackles. Like, you're not always going to have the opportunity to come back. So you want to get it ingrained in the players that, yes, you're getting away with it right now, or it might not mean as much because it's USF and it's not Alabama State. So that might be the case, but you don't want, when it comes to Alabama State, for that to be the game that you're messing up, that you're having 3 interceptions, that you're putting points on the board for the other team. Those are things that you do not want to happen. So that's something that I think was, I thought it was important to articulate for the team. Mistakes are going to happen, but you want to try to clean up mistakes early before they become recurring mistakes. So the quote, once again, is the talent is there. And I think everyone saw that tonight. You see, this is me interjecting, but you've seen guys like Isaiah Major, who was Defensive Player of the Week, and I thought he performed extremely well. The talent is there. Back to Willie Simmons' words. But like we've always told our guys, talent is not enough. It's about the little things. And the little things are things like not shooting yourself in the foot, not missing opportunities, not turning the ball over. These are things that have been around in the first 2 weeks. We can 100% say that they had talent. But go through these 2 games. The talent showed you by the fact they jumped up 28-0 on Jackson State. But the little things like missing targets and not being able to put points on the board or having a holding call on a touchdown, they take points off the board. And that's the reason the loss wasn't more, or the win wasn't more. The margin wasn't more. You look at week 2, USF, you had them. You had them on the ropes. There wasn't much time that you weren't 10 points less, like 14 points at the most times. You had them on the ropes. You showed that you had talent to be able to compete with them. But could you have got this victory if you didn't have 4 turnovers? Possibly. It didn't help. I'll tell you that. It did not help. So these are the little things that he's talking about, because those type of little things come up again when you're in SWAC play, and now you're not in a SWAC championship because you kind of given up 2 games because of mistakes that you could have cured early in the season. I love this quote by Willie Simmons, and I thought it was a perfect description of where FAMU is right now, and not only that, but where they can be throughout the rest of the year. But let's look at 2 teams as we move forward in the MEAC, or really, 2 teams in the MEAC in North Carolina Central and then Howard, because I think that both of these teams have some really big opportunities ahead of them. But I want to kick it off with North Carolina Central as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical, and the Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes is for you to get the Jace case is to fill out a simple online survey, online form, jump in some calls sometimes. Occasionally, you have to call a licensed physician, but other than that, it's really simple. Get ongoing care from the physicians on any treatment-related questions. It's doctor-created. It's doctor-recommended. You don't want to be unprepared. At the end of the day, when you have something wrong, you want to be able to go to the Jace case, pop open that antibiotic, and be good. Don't be caught off guard. Prepare yourself. Be proactive about your health, not reactive. Be proactive about your health because everybody should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones. If you want to get money off, because nobody ever wants to pay full price if you don't have to, you can save up to $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $2 or $20 off by using the code locked on at checkout at jacemedical.com. That is JASE medical.com, promo code locked on. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Thank you for that. Don't forget, tomorrow from 10 a.m. to noon Central. I almost messed up, but I thought about it for a second. From 10 a.m. to noon Central, we have the college football kickoff live. That's Friday, depending on when you listen to this. So it'll be every single Friday. So let me not say tomorrow, because you could be listening on Friday morning. It's Friday, 10 a.m., noon Central. We'll have our college football kickoff live. And at some point, not quite sure when in the program, but you'll see me. But as we move with today's episode, North Carolina Central has a huge opportunity against UCLA. And I'm not looking for the upset. I'm not talking about those things. I'm more so looking towards individual players. I will say this. It hasn't been pretty for HBCUs versus the big schools. Medium schools, a little better. But big schools like Notre Dame, LSU, those games did not go well for Tennessee State and Grambling. They just didn't. I think that North Carolina Central is a better squad than Tennessee State and Grambling. And I also think that UCLA is a worse squad than LSU and Notre Dame. By the way, Notre Dame is 9. I know I'm not speaking to the Fighting Irish community right now, but this whole idea that Tennessee State was going to wreck their hopes of being a college football playoff team was ridiculous. And if any Notre Dame fan is still here from that, thank you. I appreciate you for wanting to stay up to date with the HBCUs. But I think that that's kind of ridiculous. You had enough quality games on your schedule to where you could play Tennessee State. I understand it's a pride thing, but let's not act like it just wrecked your chances at the college football playoffs. Anywho, UCLA, North Carolina Central. It'll be interesting to see how they fare. It will be, because I do think they're one of the best HBCUs out there. So I would like to see how they perform against a big school. But these are the 4 players that I'm really looking at. Davius Richard, Latrell Collier, Torricelli Simpkins, and then also Khalil Baker. So I'll start off with Baker because he's the only defensive player here. I think he has the opportunity to really stake his claim as a draft pick, similar to how Jacoby Durant did for South Carolina State a couple of years ago when they faced off against Clemson. He had 2 interceptions. This is the benefit of FBS games. We can talk about the money and all of that. That's how the university benefits. But the reason these money games are something that I'll never write off, it's not about finances, bro. I'm a communication major. I don't know about the financial gains and all of those dealings. That's not what I'm specializing in. But when I look at what they can do on the field, I'm looking at the fact that players like Simpkins, like Baker, like Collier, like Richard, they have an opportunity to put up really good game film against a team that's already going to have scouts there. There's players on UCLA that people are coming to see already, no matter what. Didn't matter that it's North Carolina Central. It could be USC. There's going to be scouts who are going to be watching UCLA players. And now they'll be watching you because you'll be there playing. So this is like free promotion. They don't have to come see you. And you look at Baker, who already was one of the best players, an All-American in the FCS last year. If he can get some pass deflections, some interceptions, put some good film up in front of people, flash at times, that's going to do wonders for him. And that's kind of the the theme for every single player on this list of the four, but the other ones have a little bit more specific goals in mind to me. So you look at Richard, who's the next big guy, right? That's really the big name with the Eagles. But you look at Richard, man, he needs to come out there and he needs to run well. He needs to run well because that's what he does really well. He's a dual threat quarterback. One of the things that makes Davius Richard special is his ability to do it with his arm and with his legs. Now, he can't only run, but he does need to show that he can run because that's part of his game. You also, most importantly, need to show that you can pass the ball. And I know we had Joshua Sims, senior, not junior, but Joshua Sims. Well, I want to call him junior so bad, but we had Joshua Sims senior on the show. And he spoke glowingly of the traits that Davius Richard possesses. And I wouldn't dare question those traits. But I think that Brother Sims would know as well as I do that showing those traits on the FCS level is often overlooked. And a lot of times, scouts need proof of concept on upper competition. We always have this argument, not him and I, but just in general, I see it. I would love for that not to be the case. And I think a lot of people would love for FCS talent and the level of competition to not be a thing. But it is. Like, we have to stop fooling ourselves. If we want to make the argument that it shouldn't be the case, that's fine. But let's not act like it isn't. So when Davius Richard goes from facing other HBCUs and he faces UCLA, that's going to be a big thing for his draft stock, especially if he can show he can pass the ball. I don't think he can afford to have a bad game here and still get drafted. I don't. He can have a good game here and still not get drafted, but if he has a bad game, I don't think he gets drafted. I really don't. So that's what this game is so important for him with. You look at Latrell Collier, who to me, I just think needs to get from underneath Richard's shadow at times. And sometimes I feel like we talk about Davius Richard so much and he runs the ball that sometimes it overshadows what Latrell Collier is able to do. Because Richard is so special, but he also does the same thing that Collier does, we only tend to talk about one. Maybe if he was just a drop back passer and then the whole running game was Latrell Collier, we would talk about Collier that way. But we sit here and talk about how special that Richard is. So I think that a really good performance, or just a good performance, period, would make it to where you're not phasing Richard out of the conversation. That would be silly. But Latrell Collier is a prominent part where we got to make sure we say his name. Let's not only talk about Richard, let's also talk about Collier, which we should already be doing now. And I think that I do it now. But there's some people who don't, especially those who maybe don't watch North Carolina Central or pay attention to North Carolina Central that closely. Then the last one is Simpkins. And Simpkins is interesting to me because the gap between FCS and FBS a lot of times is attributed to the trenches. And it's saying, okay, the linemen are different. That's where it breaks apart. Even the biggest advocates of FCS football and the biggest advocates of not feeling like there's so much of a talent gap say the talent gap is in the trenches. Where there isn't a gap is on the perimeter, the wide receivers, the cornerbacks, like the skill positions. But I think pretty much everybody admits that there is typically a gap between the offensive line and defensive line once you go between subdivisions. So for Simpkins, who is an offensive lineman, to be able to prove I can hang with anybody, that's going to do wonders for him. And that's why you look at each one. Baker, he's already has the All-American status. He just needs to continue where he is. Richard, he needs to prove that he can pass the ball on FBS competition because scouts are going to look for that. Collier, I just think he needs to have a good performance so people can make sure they talk about him and not just with the stiff arm. And then with Simpkins, it's saying, you know what? I understand that that's where this big perceived gap is, but I'm closing the gap because I'm not relying on anybody. It's me versus my man. And at the end of the day, I'm going to put him in the dirt. That's why this is so big to me. But speaking of big matchups, speaking of must-see things, Howard, Hampton, battle for the real HU this Saturday. And I know we have some good quarterbacks in it, but in this matchup specifically, I'm looking towards the running game to not be a deciding factor, but for my entertainment purposes. And I'll tell you why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And listen, think about a time that you were stressed out. Oh man, the game. It's only a couple of days away. I can't find tickets. I probably waited too late. Everybody suffers from procrastination every now and then, but Game Time makes it better. They make up for your procrastination. Last minute tickets to the comedy show, to the theater, to the local sporting event. They have all of that. And if you are able to find a seat with a better price in the same row, in the same section, they'll credit you up to 110% back. They'll give you your money back. It's really simple. That's why Game Time is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country, because buying tickets to your favorite event should never be stressful. Waiting long shouldn't cost you a bunch of money. And with Game Time, they relieve that stress, and they relieve the stress on your pockets too. So that's my favorite thing about them. Just go on their app, download the Game Time app, use the code Locked On College, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Download the app, use that code, get $20 off your first purchase, and you tell me if I'm lying. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. My fingers were all twisted up. I didn't know what 3 and what 2 was. That's because, little story, I do 3 with my index and my thumb touching, because that's how I've seen basketball players do it all the time. Boom, 3, right? My girlfriend told me that a normal person touches the pinky. Are you a pinky or an index person with the 3? Because I do 3 like this. I don't do 3 like this. Is uncomfortable to me. I'd rather do this, but this is my go-to. Okay, 3-pointer, third segment. Thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. But just let me know, for real. Are you a pinky or index person when it comes to throwing up 3? And if you're an index person, I might delete all the pinky comments and just leave all the index and be like, see, babe, they're with me. Right, every day. Anyway, Hampton, Howard, strong running games is what I am looking forward to watching when it comes to this matchup on Saturday. I understand that Quentin Williams. I understand that Christopher Zellous is in this game. I understand that both of them are pretty good passers. But it's the running game that Darren, the mouth of the South Gray, is looking forward to. At the end of the day, that's what I'm looking for, because this is the battle for the real HU, and I hope that it's decided in the trenches. Both of these universities have quarterbacks who have impressed me. Christopher Zellous actually runs the ball, so he'll be involved in this running game a lot. But that's what I want to see for Howard. They entered the season with this nice trio of running backs. You had Jarrett Hunter. You had Eden James. You had Ian Wheeler. And what if I told you that there's a name that's not in that triumvirate who you really need to watch out for, and that's Casey Hawthorne. He's a wide receiver, but he's a do-it-all guy. He takes direct snaps and gets 50-yard touchdowns, 40-yard touchdowns. That's what he was able to do against Howard. He actually is the leading rusher for Howard this year, or he did against Morehouse. He's the leading rusher for Howard this year, and he has 3 touchdowns on the ground, and he has 1 through the air. This dude is a dynamic player who, no, he's not a running back. He's not amongst that trio and whatnot, but he's somebody who's been very effective for the Bison. So you also have Wheeler and then James. James didn't play in this last game against Morehouse, but he did play against Eastern Michigan. And I like both of these players' performances this year because you had good games against the FBS talent. Mind you, just like we talked about at the beginning of the show, FBS team, group of 5, upper echelon HBCU, the game is competitive. That's the thing. We need to get out of this habit of trying to compare all the HBCUs to the upper echelon of the FBS. Stop comparing these people to Alabama and Georgia. Like, that's ridiculous to me. Oh, y'all ain't Georgia. Y'all not Alabama. You know, how many schools in the FBS aren't Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or Michigan? Like, come on, let's be real. But anyway, you're looking at this triumvirate of running backs. Wheeler, James, Hunter. Wheeler and James had really nice performances against Eastern Michigan. So I like the fact that they weren't just eating against Morehouse and just padding their stats against them. And that was a really good sign to me of those 2 running backs' performance going into the year. And you look at Jarrett Hunter, who everybody can't have a great game every game. It's just not enough, especially when you have 3 running backs. Not possible. But Hunter had 8 for 64 against Morehouse. James had 9 for 97 against against Eastern Michigan. Wheeler had 8 for 67 against Eastern Michigan. These are nice performances that these guys are stacking up. But then you look at Hampton, and Hampton not only has the running backs, but they also have Christopher Zellous. And I liked Zellous. He looked really good against Grambling. I thought that he operated the zone read really well. I thought he found the creases and had nice explosion through the holes. I really did like watching Christopher Zellous. So he's somebody that you can't leave out of this running attack. Then you have the running backs. And with the running backs, you have Elijah Burris, who went for 137 last week. You have Darren Butts, who went for 100 the week prior against Grambling. Like I said, everybody can't eat each week, but you've had a 100-yard rusher in both of your first 2 games. Hampton knows how to run the ball. And I think that zone read, if you can't stop that, it's going to be difficult to stop their offense. I really like this game. I'm really liking the running attack that we're seeing from these guys, whether that's the triumvirate +1 over there in Howard, or if we're talking about the duo, the two-headed monster plus the quarterback position at Hampton. The battle for the real HU is going to be something that you need to watch. But I'm specifically looking at the running attack of each game. We'll pepper in some pass here and there. They'll actually probably pass quite a bit. But for me, I'm hoping that they have a nice old-fashioned 1970s running game, because these running backs and these running weapons, if you want to talk about Casey Hawthorne, who's an all-around threat, this is a quality game for running. All right. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Check out those games on Saturday. I have one more that you need to watch, and that is our Alabama A&M versus Southern matchup. Can Southern get right? I don't know. You have to hear what I think as on tomorrow's episode. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, you can follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Peace.